Hurricane Ian is about to make its second landfall, and as this historic storm makes for the South Carolina coast, near or not too far from the city of Charleston. We'll take a look at everything regarding what is happening with Hurricane Ian. And, of course, we will take a look at the impacts of all of that's going on in the east with regards to the weekend weather through the mid-Atlantic states and the Northeast, and a look ahead to next week in a rather, let's call it, coolish pattern that is setting up. All that and more today on the special Joe and Joe Weather Show here at lunchtime, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125, the phone number. And with all that's been going on with tropicals and storms and hurricanes outside of our area, this might be a good time to make sure everything is working, like a nice portable generator in case you don't have one or need a new one. And, of course, to get your yard in order with mulch and topsoil as we go through the fall months, head over to Omni. Again, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, 631-756-1125, the phone number. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. Good afternoon, Mr. Cioffi.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon to everybody on the chat board joining in this very rare noontime show, which we've done twice this week, by the way. not once, but twice. Ian making its final approach now to the South Carolina coast. A much different type of storm than it was when it was in the Gulf of Mexico. Clearly, it's not a Category 5. You know, it's sort of like a mid-range Category 1 storm, sort of in line with what we were thinking of. And once it's inland, Joe, there's not a whole lot that's going on south of the center. When we look at it on the satellite, the Hurricane Center has been describing it as sort of a hybrid type storm, and I agree with that. I mean, if you look at it in terms of the structure on the satellite, it's still a warm core storm, but it also has that look that a non-tropical system would have. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference. It's wind and rain and storm surge, but we'll get it over with, and then we'll move on to see what happens with all that moisture over the next couple of days.
Yeah, well, if you think about the last week, Joe, think about this now. We don't normally do shows on Friday. Last Friday we were on because we were talking about the previous tropical system heading for Atlantic Canada, Fiona.
Right.
And now here we are a week later talking about another tropical system, this, of course, being Ian, making not its first but its second landfall, this time over South Carolina after really doing a number on Florida just a couple of days ago. It has been one of the busier weeks, in fact, one of the busiest weeks we've had for hurricanes and tropical systems in quite some time. And this all comes in the wake of what turned out to be a very, very quiet July and August. Everybody is probably saying, oh, my goodness, it's going to be nothing to talk about this season in terms of tropical systems, tropical storms, and hurricanes. In fact, we even had one numbskull about 8 or 10 days ago saying, this whole hurricane season is going to be a bust. Really? Really? Well, if this is a bust, I suppose you could ask the people in Puerto Rico, in the Dominican Republic, in Cuba, in Florida, and Atlantic Canada, how much of a bust this hurricane and tropical storm season has been to date. And what's really frightening, Joe, is that we now have the entire month of October in front of us, and October isn't a month that is dull. Usually we've seen some of our more prolific and more dynamic storms come in October. Case in point, just 10 years ago, we had Sandy within a couple of days at the end of the month of October. I don't even know what October has in plan for us, but one thing is for sure, we've certainly had our fair share over again just this past week.
Yeah, I tend to think that the active period should continue through at least the next several weeks. There might be a short break. Sometimes when you have an explosive period like we've had, where we've put 6 named storms on the map in the month of September. Actually, most of those have come. Well, they've been pretty. I guess they've been pretty evenly distributed through the month. But we went from from the D storm now through the I storm. So DEFGHI, that's 6, and it's conceivable that in October we could have. I'm going to just take a stab at it. Maybe another 3 or 4 storms running around, particularly in the first half. And, the models are kind of hinting at a few things possible. So we'll get to that in just a little bit. Chuck Cardillo hitting super chat, hitting the tip jar early. And he says, thank you, Joe and Joe, for your great coverage of the storm and all the weather in general. Much appreciation. Thank you, Chuck. I really appreciate that you bang on the tip jar. And welcome to everybody on the chat board on this Midday Joe and Joe Weather Show. If you like the Joe and Joe Weather Show, hit the like button, because Joe and I love when people hit the like button and we get 100 likes. And what else did I want to say? Oh, if you're new to the Joe and Joe Weather Show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time we're on, which is Monday through Thursday, usually at 7:30. Friday and Saturday, we're usually off, except when there's a storm like today. And Sundays, which we won't be on this Sunday, Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I've got the satellite loop up there, and this is the tight shot. And some of that southern area, some of the stuff south of the center is kind of filled in a little bit, but you could see out to the east of the center. The clouds are rather streaky. They're not. There's a ball of convection near the center, but it sort of arcs around about 3/4 of the way. And the worst of it is now as it moves on land.
Absolutely. And Philip Neary, by the way, on the chat board points out, and he's absolutely right, this isn't the second landfall. This is the third landfall for Ian. Of course, it also made landfall on the western end of Cuba.
Yes.
Before reaching Florida. Cuba was first, then came Florida, and now we're waiting on the third landfall. Third landfall, my goodness. And this will be on the coastline of South Carolina, not too far from Charleston. And Joe, I pointed out in the promotion of our show this morning that this is the first landfall, direct landfall for South Carolina in 6 years. Now, can you remember what hurricane made landfall in South Carolina 6 years ago?
So 6 years ago would be 2016, right?
Right.
And I have absolutely no clue whatsoever.
I'll give you the first letter, M.
M?
Yes.
M as in Michael?
No.
M as in Matthew.
Matthew, that's right. Well, for the first time since Matthew in 2016, we now have Ian. And it's interesting. Matthew hit South Carolina right about this same time of the season, late September in 2016. Of course, we had moved all the way up to the M storm. And this year, chiefly because July and August was so quiet, we're only up to the I on the list so far with Ian. But it doesn't really matter what letter you're talking about, I or M. It's still a destructive system, and this will be a name that will probably be the last that we'll see, because I'm sure that Ian will be retired after this season is over, said and done.
One thing that always happens when tropical storms, after they pull out, in the areas that have had the impact are enjoying a absolutely stellar day, and that is across the state of Florida. I have to tell you, I was outside this morning, Joe. It was in the low 60s this morning. The dew points are low. It's not humid at all because we have a west wind here. So if we were wondering what happened to all that dry air, well, it finally got pulled down on the south side here with the west wind. And again, that actually adds, some of the dry air is involved in the structure of this system, which gives it this sort of hybrid look to it. But on the wide U.S. view, you'll notice that there's a lot of cloudiness that extends from there across the Carolinas and Virginia, then goes east-northeast out in the open waters of the Atlantic. That's all getting back to arc westward. That's all going to get arced back west and northwestward with moisture for tonight and for Saturday, as we're setting up for some rains for the Mid-Atlantic and for the Northeast. At the moment, though, the focus is on Ian and the ball, Joe, of convection and the center getting very, very close to land. We've got some flash flood warnings up. I see 3 of them up there along the coast. I've got this wide radar view here. The rain, a band of rain is now about reached western North Carolina. If I wanted to guess, probably very close to Charlotte, North Carolina. There are some heavy rains on the northeast side in northeastern North Carolina at the moment from the Outer Banks and just about edging into southeastern Virginia. And the lead band, by the way, that's in western North Carolina, runs across southwest Virginia, northeastward to, the southern Delaware border on the Delmarva Peninsula to Chesapeake Bay. So it's a fairly large area here of rain that's moved in.
Right, and right now I have the long wave infrared on my screen, and when you refer to this as a ball, yeah, on this particular view, it certainly does. In fact, the ball is expanding, Joe. It would appear, and not a whole heck of a lot of dark shades of blue on the view that I'm looking at. It would indicate, rapid buildup of convection and cold cloud tops, but still, nonetheless, there's a nice push of moisture. Well, maybe a push, maybe not a nice push of significant rainfall that is moving into the coastal areas of South Carolina. And again, this will be Ian's last stand, so to speak, Ian's last landfall, because it will indeed be moving inland. All that moisture because of frictional drag being wrung out over the Carolinas. And this weekend, I'm sorry to say for Saturday, I don't know if you had a chance to look, Joe, but I checked out the NAM FOOS, the North American model, the 12Z run, and they are dumping from 2 o'clock Saturday morning to 8 p.m. Saturday evening, the NAM FOOS on LaGuardia dumping 1.44 inches of rain. That combined with northeast winds sustained at 15 to 20, with occasionally gusts up to 40, holding temperatures down in the mid and low 50s. It looks like a thoroughly miserable, ugly day in the New York City metropolitan area tomorrow, and we can all thank Ian for that.
Yeah, even though we're not going to see the center move up all the way up the coast, the way the whole thing is structured with the low going into western North Carolina, and then I was just looking at the tracking model charts, Joe, taking it straight east now. Almost all of them take it straight east back out into the open waters of the Atlantic. And we'll talk about the implications of that momentarily. I just was wondering, Joe, do I need to make a phone call with regards to the present movement because the Hurricane Center is carrying a north or 0 degrees at 14 miles an hour? Are you okay with this?
It's difficult.
Do I have to ring them up?
No, it's difficult, I think, at least on this view that we're looking at right now, as to exactly north seems like a pretty good motion. I'll agree with the folks down at the Hurricane Center, who certainly know a lot more about these things than I.
Are you there? Are you still there? I lost your audio for a second. Okay.
Yes, I'm still here.
I may just ring them to let them know that you find it acceptable. I think it'll reassure them. 32.4 north, 79.0 west, 60 miles or 95 kilometers if you're into kilometers, east-southeast of Charleston, South Carolina. So it looks like it'll probably make a landfall to the east of Charleston, but not by a whole lot, and 120 miles south-southwest of Cape Fear, North Carolina. 85-mile-an-hour winds, what they're carrying, maximum sustained, and the minimum central pressure now down to 980 millibars. Excuse me, 28.94 inches. And I've got now I have up here on the screen, I brought up a radar. This is the Wilmington radar. Okay. And you can sort of see on the bottom, I guess that's where the top of the center is, just offshore there. That little arm that's coming back westward. Then there's another one underneath it. So it kind of
wait a minute, Joe. Are you sure you got your radar up? Because right now it looks like you have mine up. I'm centered on Columbia, South Carolina.
All right. No, let me see. No, you're right. Your radar is up. I'm sorry. Your radar is up. So you talk. I'll come back to mine in a minute.
Well, this is the radar from Columbia, South Carolina. Columbia is almost exactly in the middle of the state. And as you can see, the storm itself is still offshore, out of the view to the lower right. But you can see that the storm is sending waves or bands of moderate to heavy rainfall into the South Carolina coast and progressing on a steady westerly clip across central and south central sections of South Carolina. It seems to be diminishing some, at least a few of the bands seem to be diminishing some as they reach the central part of the state toward Columbia. But you could see that there is very significant, if not substantial, activity crashing into the immediate coastal plain, especially around Charleston. We believe that Charleston is going to pick up at least a half a foot of rain, maybe a bit more when this is all over said and done. And it's a rapid forward speed, Joe. The storm is moving relatively rapidly. I mean, last week we were seeing Fiona, for example, moving at 40 miles an hour. And what I'm trying to say is that with Ian, he has picked up speed a bit from about 8 miles an hour forward speed now to about 14. And the sooner that we can get Ian inland and out of the water, the sooner the storm is going to begin to diminish, and that would be good news. But it also means that it'll also be more rapid for those heavy rain bands to progress inland from the ocean, and that's what is happening right now. If you're located in Charleston or anywhere along the coastline of South Carolina, you're getting drenched with, again, moderate to heavy activity.
Can you bring up the Clorox radar, which is Charleston, CLX?
The Clorox radar.
Well, I call it the Clorox radar because CLX is CLX is the stock market ticker symbol for Clorox.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why I call it.
So here's the CLX radar right now, and this is you could see again the bands, the very heavy rain bands that are sweeping in, spiraling in, if you will, or if you want, cartwheeling in from the ocean onto the coastal plain of South Carolina. And it is within these yellow and orange bands that you're likely seeing rain coming down at the rate of 1 to 2 or 2 to 4 inches per hour. Pretty hefty amounts.
I have some observations while you take a look at the Charleston radar. North Charleston is reporting heavy rain, a temperature of 61 with a dew point of 60. North at 31, gusting to 48, and visibility at a half a mile. The waterfront in Charleston is north at 33, gusting to 44. Johns Island is 29, gusting to 41. Pinopolis, never knew there was such a place called Pinopolis, South Carolina, 35. These are all northerly winds pretty much. North at 35, gusting to 44. Beaufort Airport, 31, gusting to 41. Some stations are reporting heavy rain. Some are reporting light rain or moderate rain. In the South Midlands and in the, I guess it's known as the PD area of north of South Carolina. Georgetown, 31 to 48 with rain. Orangeburg, moderate rain, 21 to 32 on the wind from the north. Florence, South Carolina, 31 gusting to 45. In Myrtle Beach, moderate rain, 28 gusting to 40. North Myrtle Beach is 26 gusting to 44. Now, further south in Georgia, Savannah Airport, 18 gusting to 32. These stations in Georgia are not raining. They're all cloudy. Just a couple more. Fort Stewart is 15 gusting to 23. So everybody else is kind of gusting in the 20s, except for Savannah Airport, which is gusting up into the 30s, and a little breezy all the way into a number of places like Waycross in southeast Georgia, Brunswick, all seeing winds gusting to about 25. Augusta, also Augusta's kind of blowing here, 24 gusting to 39. So that ain't too shabby. And Augusta's not exactly in the southeast part of the state. It's a little bit more north than that. But they're getting some wind. And I just want to just check and see if we go to I'm going to go to Wilmington, North Carolina, and just take a look at some of the odds from there on the east side. And we're seeing let's see. Wilmington is 30. Northeast at 30, gusting to 44. North Myrtle Beach on this one is now is because it might have just updated. Northeast at 30, gusting to 53. And Myrtle Beach itself is 21 to 45. Elizabeth City, which is pretty far up there away from the center, Joe. Elizabeth City is northeast at 35, gusting to 45, and they're not even on the water. I mean, that's pretty windy. And also Raleigh-Durham, which is well inland, they're 20, gusting to 33 with moderate rain there. Charlotte, cloudy, no rain yet, but 23, gusting to 33. So wind's a little busy there on the northeast quadrant. Goes pretty far up. I'm a little surprised at that.
Speaking of Charlotte, that is exactly what we have right now on the screen. The view from Charlotte, North Carolina, the satellite view from centered on Charlotte. And you could see there is Ian, that growing ball, as Joe mentioned at the start of the show, just pushing inward at 14 or so miles an hour on a forward speed to the north. And you mentioned all those places in North Carolina. What about Mount Pilot, Joe? What are they reporting?
Both Mount Pilot and Mayberry. Mount Pilot is, you're talking about Mount Pilot International Airport, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they may have. I think they may have shut down. That was back in the day when airports, some of these local small airports, used to close at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and they would be closed all night. So if you got MacArthur Airport, Islip MacArthur Airport was like that until the early 2000s, when if it snowed at night, it didn't get measured. So their snow records are, and there were a bunch of years where that actually happened, and they're missing a whole bunch of snow records. So, but yeah, Mount Pilot, very busy Mount Pilot. God knows everybody's flying from, there's a New York shuttle, Joe, that goes from LaGuardia to Mount Pilot to so people can do their business in Mayberry.
That isn't the Eastern shuttle, is it?
No, the Eastern shuttle is long, long gone. All right, let's look at some models. Let's take a look at some models here, and I've got the HRRR, so we can sort of lay some perspective. Actually, that's ready to go. But before we even do that, I just want to show the Hurricane Ian intensity models. It's kind of interesting. So we see a landfall, and all of the intensity models show the rather rapid weakening that occurs in the next 24 hours. But then not more than a few of these models, Joe. There's actually about 6 or 7 of them that the weakening bottoms out, and then they start to either hold their own as a low-range tropical storm, or even have it as a mid to high-range tropical storm going forward. And I thought, well, that's interesting enough, and I'm guessing that these are perhaps the surface model plots of these intensity models, which show this going inland and then making a sharp right turn and going maybe back out offshore off the North Carolina coast. And if we look at the track model guidance, actually Almost all of them do that now, which is pretty interesting. They take it inland. And by the way, it was a very, very smart thing from a forecast standpoint to pay attention to those. The last couple of nights, Joe, we've been pointing out the blue model plots, the UKX models. I guess it's a UK Met model because they were the first to pick up on this more eastward component of motion when it was going into Southwest Florida. And here again, we're seeing where that model has been um, pretty good at showing the landfall in South Carolina being maybe more east of Charleston, about halfway between Charleston and Myrtle Beach. They all make this sharp right turn and take it off the North Carolina coast and then east-northeast from there into the open waters of the Atlantic. Now, obviously, there should not be a fourth landfall, but nevertheless, we may still be talking about this in one form or another come the over the weekend and next week.
Yeah, it's funny because the official National Hurricane Center track simply brings the storm inland on a north-northwest trajectory, and it only shows it, Joe, for the next 3 days. They don't even show it beyond that. So whatever this is that we've been looking at for early next week, either is a first cousin of Ian, or is something totally different, or something that is completely developing separate from Ian for early next week.
Yeah, the Hurricane Center after something once it becomes post-tropical, they wash their hands of it for pretty much. So as long as they can trace the core, as long as there's an identifiable core or a low center that they can track, if that emerges intact, then it would, and it strengthens again, it would keep the same name. But if the core disappears completely and then it's something new, a new low forms, then it would get a different name. So that's sort of how that works.
Right.
I don't know. The models, the global models are kind of ambiguous about how this plays out. But let's look at the HRRR short range, because now we're talking about this rain moving up the East Coast, and you can see here it's rolling it inland sometime between say 2 and 4 o'clock this afternoon. It goes up to west of Raleigh Durham, and here comes the rain up the coast overnight, and it reaches New York City. Actually, it reaches New York City by midnight, if you want to believe this, and rains overnight into tomorrow morning. And then by early afternoon, Joe, by 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, the rain is just about done in New York City on the HRRR. And by noon, 1 o'clock, it's done on Long Island with just maybe a couple of scattered showers for the rest of the day. So I don't know. I think that's not impossible if it's correct on the speed. The other models kind of show the same idea, but they just take longer to get there. And you still see the lingering low Saturday night into Sunday morning somewhere in eastern North Carolina. A new low forms southeast of Montauk on Sunday. And well, the gradient isn't too shabby either between that and the new high that's building down from eastern Canada. So maybe the NAM model has the right idea with that gradient. And here is the NAM model. The NAM model brings it in actually a little further east of the HRRR, Joe, brings it in over Myrtle Beach. And it has rain reaching New York City roughly about 2 a.m. And Philadelphia gets into the rain for our friends in Southeast PA. It arrives around 10:11 p.m. There's your low in central North Carolina. Just kind of leaves it there. First area of rain goes up. Again, just like the HRRR, just maybe a couple of hours slower, and then goes out. And then a new low forms here off the North Carolina coast come Monday night. And the gradient is fairly tight from central New Jersey down over into the Delmarva Peninsula. And the GFS, just to add one more to this mess, let's see what that has to say. And here too, just west of Myrtle Beach, up into central North Carolina. Rain to New York City on, if you believe this, Joe, it's got rain to New York City by 8 o'clock this evening. That seems a bit fast, don't you think?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. But by 2 a.m., it only moves up. Maybe the northern edge is up at around Route 84. But the low is in central North Carolina. You've got heavy rains going on in western Virginia, western North Carolina, northeast, also into southern New Jersey, parts of Pennsylvania. Then you've got one batch that goes into the Appalachians. You got one batch that goes east across New Jersey, so that by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's over with from New York City west, and shortly after that to the east. And then beyond that, Joe, some rain comes back on Sunday. It's into Sunday night, and then you see there's a low that's out there. Whoa, there's a low that's rotating like crazy out here on Sunday and into Tuesday and even into Wednesday. Before it finally gets kicked away to the northeast.
But on that system that we're looking at now for example, for Tuesday 12Z, at least on the GFS, the system is somewhere, I'd say about 200 miles southeast of Long Island, but the precipitation does not make it into New York, but it does wind up. It actually retrogresses, it would appear, backward a little bit to the west,
Yes.
spins around, and then finally, boom, gets kicked out to the northeast. But by then, we're talking about like later on Thursday of next week. So we've got another system to look at for early next week that seemingly is going to be slow moving, slowly developing, and will be like Damocles sword hanging over our head for at least Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week as to whether or not it's going to do anything to us.
And yes, snow lovers, because I know they're looking at this. There's next Thursday. There's a low northeast of Lake Huron with a trailing cold front, and yep, that is all dark blue snows showing up just to the northeast of Sault Ste. Marie. And if you want, you can get in a boat and go in the middle of Lake Superior if you want to see snowflakes. There's a big cool high that's coming down behind this front. Whenever these storms, you mentioned the other day, whenever these big storms are going on, we've got tropical storms and hurricanes that are making landfalls and are having impact, we really don't pay too much attention to at the long range. And I happened to look yesterday after we were done, and I was like, whoa, that is some big trough coming into the eastern United States in the long range. And I'm just going to run this now, and you can see Thursday, Friday, Saturday, nice deep trough building into the east. And there should be a fairly decent shot of cool air coming into the eastern U.S. late next week and into the weekend. And then as that pulls out, there's another deep trough that drops into the east. Beyond that, around Monday, October 10th and 11th, that swings in. And then that lifts out, and then another deep, and now the deepest trough yet, Joe, out at around 10 or 12 days, 11 or 12 days from now, or 13 days from now, with a wrapped up cutoff in James Bay, westerlies all the way down to Cuba. This is a very, very. It's been a long time since we've seen upper airs this cold this early, if this verifies.
All right, Frank Riccio on the chat board. The blue is back.
Yes. And to make them all happy, we can even look at the North American snowfall loop here and see what's going on. And across much of Canada, especially eastern Labrador, gets quite a bit of snow over the next couple of weeks. So we want to build that Canadian snow cover. And it's September 30th, so tomorrow's October 1st. So that means we could start looking at Siberian snow cover. So why don't we do that? Because they're going to scream, "You got to sell the snow cover in Siberia."
Craig Carberg says, "If it only were February instead of October."
Yeah. Because by the time we get there, there's going to be a huge ridge in the east. So looking at at least up in the eastern part of Siberia gets what looks like a fair amount of snow cover. I got to talk to Bill Goodman because he knows about this more than I do in terms of what's considered to be a lot of snow and what's not considered to be a lot of snow. I mean, it looks like there's a lot of snow. Now, how much of that actually stays on the ground, I don't know. There's some sizable amounts of snow being indicated for the next couple of weeks. This is the snow total through 16 days, which takes us through October the 16th. But whether that's ample or not. And then I do remember that he likes to see the snowfall more in the western part of this zone as opposed to the eastern part. And at least through the first half of October, there's not a whole lot of snow growth going on in the western part. Not that it means anything because this indicator stopped working as soon as we realized that it was working. So
Yeah.
so there's almost no point to this.
Well, we're going to have to see, but you're absolutely right. This is very unusual. The last several autumns, we have had, abnormally mild, and of course, last year we had record-breaking heat in the month of December, which also led to a severe weather outbreak, a very tragic severe weather outbreak in mid-December. So whether or not we actually trend back toward cooler conditions for a change, we'll see whether this lasts through October and on into November and on into December. It is certainly different than what we have been accustomed to seeing in recent years.
All right, so I think that pretty much covers it here, Joe. I think you and I both agree that it's going to be a rough time in South Carolina. Obviously, we see where all the heavy rain is. I think the bigger issue here is going to be the rainfall more than the wind. I mean, the wind is there, but once the storm is inland, it's really going to be. It's not like we saw. Obviously, what we saw in Southwest Florida. Um, I don't know how much of the damage, looking at these pictures that are coming in from Fort Myers and Sanibel Island and that whole area there. It's just, I mean, it's just devastating what Ian has done.
Biblical.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but of course, you're getting the handful of stories of people that decided to stay and and not evacuate and ride the storm out, and now they're having to rescue them. I have to tell you, I said this to someone this morning. If it were me making that decision about rescuing them, I think I would go rescue somebody else first. I mean, it's one thing if you can't get out. I mean, there are people that are physically maybe were not able to get out because they had no one to get them out. I'm talking elderly people. God forbid that they were just sort of left there by whoever left them there. But if I have no sympathy for anybody who really, I just don't. If you chose to stay, then you should reap the consequences of your decision.
Well, two stories that were close to the heart that I've watched on MSNBC. One was a woman who yesterday was trying to shield her terminally ill husband underneath a kitchen table, I believe.
Yes.
While the water was rising or whatever. And she was just like shaking when she was being interviewed by an MSNBC reporter. And then this morning, they showed you a picture of an elderly couple, of a couple who looked like they were in their 70s, holding their grandchild, who must have been only about 3 or 4 years old. And they said these two people are missing. They decided they were going to write it out in their house, in their basement or their ground floor of their house. And now they are missing. And the Lord only knows where they are or where they may have ended up, because the water in and around their home and in their neighborhood was, very high, and they haven't been able to account for them at least just yet. And the helicopters flying over from the Coast Guard, rescuing I think like 140 people who again said they were going to stay in their homes, and now
And the thing is, those people doing the rescuing are now risking their lives.
Correct.
To save those people who could, honestly, didn't care enough except for themselves. And look, I get the attachment about staying in your house. No one feels more secure than when you're in your own home, okay? And I get that. And I get that you don't want to let go of that security, and and again, I understand it. But at some point you have to just you have to walk away, because all that sort of stuff is replaceable. A human life is not replaceable. Once it's gone,
Right.
it's gone.
Right.
So, like, I don't know. I would think after all these years and all these storms that we've seen this, that these stories of people staying behind would be few and far between. But apparently, no, they aren't.
It's unfortunate, and don't know what really to say. I said my piece 2 days ago in advance of the storm, before it fully arrived in Florida. I said those people who decide to stay are just dummies, because I'm sure they have gone through their fair share of tropical storms and hurricanes for a good number of years living down in Florida, and they figured, well, I can just ride this one out. But when you see all the signals that we saw, Joe, Category 4 and storm surges of 12 to 18 feet and a variety of different things, you say, that's it. You got to leave. And those people rolled the dice, decided to stay, and now they're paying the consequences.
All right. You know what? On that note, it's a gorgeous day here, because I'm still in Florida myself, in Fort Pierce on the East Coast, and I want to take advantage of the nice weather, because I'll be driving back to Georgia, where the weather has been absolutely fantastic. I'll be driving back to Georgia on Sunday, so I want to go in the pool, because up there it's been in the 40s at night, low 40s. Might even have been lower than that. I didn't even see what the low was this morning, but going to enjoy the rest of my day. So thanks everybody for being here on this special noontime show, as we watched Ian do its thing. And Joe and I are, barring any last minute surprises, we will be back on Monday. So there'll be no Sunday show. We'll be back on Monday, and we're going to also adjust the start time slightly. Okay, so we will be starting Monday. We will be on the 5s. We will start at 7:35 Eastern Time. And we're doing it because 5 is my favorite number. Just so you know. I need it to end in 5. Gemini's in retrograde to Libra, so this is how I, have to astronomically compensate for that displacement. And so 7:35 on Monday. Okay?
I heard you.
Don't you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you.
Goodbye.
We'll see you on Monday.